So this is gonna be really long. I feel like, well, too long for me to type it out, and that's why I'm doing this. Um, this book is crazy. I don't even know. I don't even know what to say. I was not expecting it at all. Um, when I was originally trying to decide what book I wanted to read next, I knew that I wanted to go for something kind of in the genre of what I've been writing. So I knew it needed to be either a fantasy or a sci-fi, because I had just finished a few months back my fantasy manuscript, The Storm on the Lake. I'm about 27 chapters into the sequel of that, The Tempest Wars, and then I'm about 9 chapters into the sci-fi manuscript that I'm working on. And so I wanted to get something more in that genre, just to kind of expand and see how other authors are writing in these genres. And so, in doing my research, my choices came down to, um, I think it's the Throne of Glass series and the Red Rising series. And I think I don't know, Brittany and Kiefer, if you're watching this, I think the Throne of Glass is that one that y'all described as being interesting, kind of racy. Maybe not though. Um, but yeah, ultimately I decided to go with Red Rising because when I was doing the research for it, um, a lot of stuff online, people were debating whether or not it was in the genre of young adult. And I don't like young adult. I never wanted to read it. I was never really interested in it. But the debate online was basically, yes, it's young adult. It has all the aspects of a young adult book. Um, but then a bunch of other people were like, no, it's way too violent for that. And the general premise of the story, the blurb was good enough that I got interested. I was like, sure, I'll read it, I'll figure it out. And I'm gonna try to do the less spoilery stuff right here, and then when I start getting into spoilers, I'll let y'all know. So if you do decide that you want to read the book, you're not gonna get it spoiled like in my past reviews. But I I bought the book Red Rising, and I ended up reading it, and my worst fears with it were realized at the beginning. It had every aspect of your typical young adult story. It had the, hyper authoritarian bourgeoisie metaphor government oppressing the lower classes, and the main characters a part of the lower class, and they want to tear it all down and change everything. And the main character's a teenager. He's 16 years old, and he's like, he feels a lot like a Mary Sue character at the beginning. He's just way better than everyone at everything, and he knows it. He talks about how much better he is than everyone at everything, and he's super handsome, and everybody loves him, but then everybody also hates him at the same time, and it was really annoying. And I was like just thinking, crap, I'm not gonna be able to. I have to finish this book though, so it's just gonna drag on. It's gonna be the worst thing ever. Um, but then it started to get really, really interesting. It ended up becoming, out of the books that I've done reviews on, it's been the most entertaining out of all. It's one of my favorite books that I've ever read. Period. It's absolutely insane. Um, so for the non spoiler information about what the story is, basically it's set in, I think, the 26th century, um, out in the future, and society has changed into these classes of people with based on color. So the golds, people with gold hair and golden eyes and beautiful skin, and they're all handsome and stuff, and they're at the top and they rule everything. And then at the very bottom is the reds, red hair, red eyes, they wear red colors. And the main character Darrow is a part of the Red Society, and he is on Mars beneath the surface along with his family, and for generations they've lived underneath the surface of the red planet mining helium 4, I think, because that's what the society, they call it, is going to use to terraform Mars so that the people of Earth can leave the dying planet of Earth and live on Mars. And so they're working hard to try to help humanity. but they're extremely oppressed. There's tons of rules. There's certain songs they can't sing, songs about freedom and breaking chains. If they sing it, they'll literally get executed. Um, it's just a really brutal existence. He's 16 years old. He has a wife who's also 16, and he doesn't like the system, but he's kind of still a part of it and says, you got to do what you got to do to survive. But his wife is like super communist, right? And that's another aspect of the story, is it just combines like Christian imagery and like communist ideologies. And it was really weird and a little off-putting for me as well, but that'll get into kind of spoilers if I go too much into that, so I'll leave that for the later part of the review. But so Darrow's wife, Io, is her name. She says all sorts of crazy stuff, like just just communist stuff. I mean, like she's like, all of this belongs to us because we're the ones who built it, and we need to tear down the golds and rise up and build our own new society. And it's she's telling him, Darrow, that he's going to be a savior and he's going to save everybody and he's going to change the whole system. Um, and help people rise up and break their chains. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. You're crazy. Um, but yeah, it's that's where I gotta stop because I will start getting spoilery. But that's kind of the premise that you're dealing with the story. So if you like that and that sounds interesting, I'm telling you right now, it's an amazing book. You gotta read it. Um, but other than that, I'm probably gonna start getting into spoilers now because I just gotta talk about it because it's so freaking crazy. Um, so spoilers, hardcore spoilers from here on out. So basically, he, him and his wife sneak away because his wife wants to give him a gift, and they end up going into this restricted area that's really beautiful. It's got this glass dome because they've never seen the sky before, or plants or animals or anything like that, and they can actually see the sky up into the surface. And they're not allowed to be there, so they get captured by uh, the people who serve the golds, the police, and their punishment is that they're going to get lashes. And this is where we start getting into more of that Christian imagery. They drag him up in front of everybody and they whip him mercilessly with these lashes. He gets 20 lashes, his back's all torn up and bloody. And then his wife goes up and she gets her lashes. And then she starts singing one of their forbidden songs about rising up and freedom and all of that. And he knows that's a death sentence, so she gets sentenced to die. And she gets hung. And this is where the story starts kind of moving away from young adult and making you think, wait a minute, would they put that in a kid's in a teenager's book even? And because they're on Mars, it's 0.27 of Earth's gravity. So when they hang her, she's not dying quickly enough. So her husband, has to run up and grab her legs and pull her down to break his own wife's neck to end her suffering. And it's like, yeah, geez, um, that's pretty rough. And he's just broken after this happens, and he's mad at his wife. I don't know why she would do that. She killed herself for nothing. And um, so he, in a rage, decides to go bury her body, which is also illegal. They're supposed to leave the bodies rotting up there so everybody knows what happens when you mess up. And um, but he goes out and he buries her body, and he knows that's a death sentence for him. So sure enough, they sentence him to die, and his drunk uncle gives him some alcohol to drink, and he says, drink that whole flask, and he drinks it all. And this is where some of the issues I had with the story start to pop up, where the writing, it's really like, stomp your foot, this is going to be on the test. Hey, that's pretty interesting. It's really in your face. It holds the reader's hand a lot. And so, for example, one of the things that happens there is when he's drinking this alcohol, it's a first person point of view story. And um, he's drinking the alcohol, and it says, oh, it tastes different than normal. That's strange. And it's just kind of like, oh, come on, can't you just say, it tastes weird, and he thinks it's because he's so depressed that it tastes weird or something, and then move on. And then, we as the reader will note that that's important, but they make him say it to the reader and go, hey, that's pretty strange, isn't it? Wonder if that'll be important later. And of course it is. It turns out it like slows his heart rate or something, so he doesn't actually die, and he ends up getting buried. And he wakes up and he's resurrected, right? And this is where a lot of that Christian imagery comes in. He's supposed to be a savior. He's tortured in front of everybody. His wife sings this song, and he goes against the grain and gets executed in front of everybody because of it. And now everybody, is talking about him, and he gets resurrected and comes back to life. Not really, but these people pick him up, and they're part of this terrorist organization that keeps insisting they're not terrorists, even though they're definitely terrorists. That's another issue I have, because it feels like the author's trying to tell us, oh, these people aren't terrorists, they're just doing what needs to be done. It's like, hey, you think terrorists don't think they're just doing what needs to be done? They're still definitely 100% terrorists. But, and more of that communist imagery, his color is red. They're talking about rising up and this all belongs to us. His weapon that he prefers to use is a sling blade. That's what he calls it. It's literally a sickle, right? Like a communist, hammer sickle. He uses this, and he ends up getting nicknamed the Reaper later on. But basically, these terrorists are like, look, buddy, you're going to be our mole, right? They're going to put him through all this plastic surgery to make him look like a gold and give him this background so that he can fit in with the gold society and rise up the ranks and build an army and then use that to, tear down the oppressive regime. Um, and this was the point when the story starts getting good, because they take him, these terrorists, they take him up to the surface, and he realizes we're not here to colonize Mars. Mars has been colonized for hundreds of years. There's cities everywhere. He sees birds and people just walking down the street and drinking and having a good time, and he's just completely blown away by this. And he realizes not only is Mars already colonized, there's multiple other planets that are colonized, and moons and asteroids, and the Earth's moon is the headquarters of everything, and they're just lying to you. We've been slaves this whole time, and he's just blown away by it. So he's like, yeah, sure, I'll be your inside man to this terrorist organization. Oh, we're not terrorists. We're not terrorists. Um, and that's when I started getting really interested, and that's when the book starts getting really graphic. So he undergoes this surgery to become, something more, so that he looks more like one of these fancy people that have, they're way stronger than everybody, they're way prettier than everybody, they have golden hair and golden eyes, and it talks about him like getting all of his skin peeled off, and he's just laying there for weeks, like regrowing skin and organs, and he has no sedatives. He refuses the sedatives, and he wants to feel the pain because he's so angry and angsty and edgy synonyms. But he goes through all of this pain, gets new teeth and new bones. He just looks totally different, golden hair, and he learns everything there is to know about this new society that he's never heard about. So he's ready for them. He goes into this institute, and this is where it starts getting real Hunger Games, but it blows Hunger Games out of the water. It's like if Hunger Games had a baby with Game of Thrones. It's so brutal and insane. Um, he gets to this institute, and they have no idea what's going to happen to him on the inside. They just know that it exists, and this is where the top of even the Gold's race, they're top, the peerless scarred, they call them, the top dogs make it out of this academy. And he goes through, and he has to kill someone, right? They basically take everyone, they kidnap them, they strip them completely naked, right? These 16-year-old kids, or 17-year-old kids at this point, strip them completely naked, throw them in a room together, and they say, hey, only one person can come out. And these two guys, he has to beat the crap out of his friend, the only friend he's made since he's joined this new school. And the way it describes it is just brutal. It describes his face. He ends up killing this kid, beating him to death, with headbutts. And it describes his face as being like split open, like a blossoming red flower, and him twitching on the ground. And I was like, oh, I don't think this is a book for kids. I don't think this is young adult. I don't know. Maybe though, because they haven't cussed much. They've only used PG-13 cussing, damn and hell, and they've they kind of faded to black when there was sex stuff going on. It gets so rough. It gets so brutal. So the main portion of the academy is they literally take all these kids, they throw them out in the woods, and they divide them into houses represented by different Greek gods. He joins House Mars, of course, because he's on Mars, and that's the big theme here. There's 12 houses, and basically whoever can manage to defeat and enslave all the other houses wins. And that's when it starts getting really insane. They have a little civil war, and he's trying to become the best of the best and be the one leader on top of everybody else because he wants to rise up as high as possible, get as big of an army as possible so he can tear these people down. And there's a lot of back and forth of, man, these people are really cool and they're nice and they're funny, but they're also insane, and I also want to kill them all, and a lot of moral conundrums like that. There's a guy who they split, their house is split, and one of them, this guy Titus, takes over the castle and kind of kicks him out. Darrow kicks Darrow, our main character, out with his people. And it describes Titus, the biggest and strongest in their group, as taking multiple slaves and having torture rooms where he cuts off their ears. These are children in a school, right? They're cutting their ears off and breaking their fingers. And specifically, he takes the girls and keeps them in a tower where he rapes them every single day. He uses those words. It's not like oh, he did unspeakable things to them. It's like, no, he's a rapist and he's raping these girls every day. And it describes the sounds of their screams echoing across the forest and stuff. It's nuts. And these are kids, right? These are teenagers. And he's like, they start killing each other, and these medical bots come down from this big floating mountain where all the teachers are, and they'll save some kids but not save others. And it's just this, it feels weird, almost like the game's rigged. And of course it turns out to be. But it's absolutely brutal. There's death and blood and gore and sexual assault all over the place, all over this book. And it's absolutely nuts. And we get to see Darrow fall from grace and then rise up and then fall again and then rise up and then fall again and build up a new army and then lose that army. And this is where the author completely shines, and I was completely lost in this story. This review wasn't due until the end of the month, and it's what is it? It's the 6th. It's the 6th, and I wasn't supposed to finish with this till the end of the month. I steamrolled through this at 1 o'clock this morning. I finally finished the book, and this book screwed up my plans, because originally what I was going to do is I was going to start off, in a group of 5 with these reviews. I was going to read a nonfiction book, like a history, and the rest were going to be fiction and then non-history. So that means this one here was going to be the last one in my group, and the next book that I was supposed to read next month was going to be a nonfiction book. I had already chosen The Storm Before the Storm, by Mike Duncan. He's the guy who does the History of Rome podcast. And it's just, a little history about the late Roman Republic period, Julius Caesar and the Wars of Marius and stuff like that. But this book was so good, when I finished this morning at 1 in the morning, I closed the book, I opened up my shop again, and I bought the next one, Golden Sun. There's twists. There's this kid ends up like killing the teachers even, and that's how crazy he gets. And this society is so brutal that they kind of reward him for it. They're like, hey, if the teachers die, they deserve to die. It's a real Spartan like society, and he's doing things that nobody else has ever done. And he's building up this army of people. Remember, all these kids are golds, kids that he hates, that he wants to kill, but they're literally in this valley for a full year. And he's like changing, and it's barely in the back of his mind now. Oh yeah, I'm supposed to be tearing these people down. That's the reason why I'm doing this. But he forgets, and he kind of doesn't care. He starts, growing up this army and doing all kinds of craziness, cutting people's hands off and scalping. They start scalping people and stuff, and poisoning their water, and it's nuts. It's totally nuts. But I ended up finishing it, and every review that I've seen of this book series has said that in this book series, the first book, this one that I just read, Red Rising, is the worst one, is the crappiest of all of them. And if that's the case, this legitimately might be one of my favorite book series that I've ever read. It might end up becoming my favorite book series that I've ever read. If the next one, which is supposed to be the best, really is like blows this one out of the water, I don't even know. I was totally blown away by this. I did not want to like it at all. For the first 1/4 of the book, I'm just kind of sitting there rolling my eyes like, okay, we get it. You're not, this author doesn't know anything about subtlety or anything like that, especially coming from reading A Dance with Dragons by George R.R. Martin. He doesn't hold the reader's hand at all, right? In fact, it's the opposite. He's like trying to say, nope, don't look at what's really going on. Don't look at what's really going on. And this guy's the complete opposite. He's like, this is exactly what's happening. But when it comes to the action, there's plenty of moments that'll literally leave you with like your jaw on the floor. And he does a really good job of surprise things still happening, right? And so I realize now that since it's a first person point of view story, I think the reason why there's those moments where it's like, huh, this alcohol tastes kind of strange. I wonder why, right? Is because it's the author's way of saying, look, the character realizes this is what's happening. He's not telling the reader, because there's tons of other times in the story where you're like, wait, what? When did that happen? How did that happen? What's going on? And where he's not holding your hand at all, and there's tons of twists and turns and crazy stuff. All of a sudden this guy gets stabbed and that guy gets his head cut off, and it comes out of nowhere. So I think, looking back on it now, it was probably more of a, look how smart the character is. He's able to figure this out even just on a little taste or just a little sound from here or there. And it's less about telling the reader what's going on. The author who wrote this story, I found out, had written six full manuscripts of different stories, and had been rejected by agents and publishers like 120 times. And he ended up writing this book, Red Rising, in 2 months while living in his mother's attic. And it's an insane book. It's amazing. I know I've said that like a billion times, but I really think that everyone would love this. Um, I don't know if they could ever make it into a book or a movie series. I think, because, like I said, it does still feel kind of like a young adult book, but it's just so much more brutal. And whatever, if they ever did make this into something, it would need an insanely high budget with all the special effects and stuff that would be required of it. And I'm not sure if they would know which direction to take it. If we should go super brutal and graphic with it like the book, or if we should tone it back and make it more for teenagers, because it involves teenagers, and a lot of teenagers do like this book. I don't know. I don't know if they could ever do it. I know if they try, I'll probably be disappointed by whatever product they make. Um, but that's just the result, I think, of reading something before it was made into visual media. So, yeah, this is, I've it messed up my whole plans for the order that I was supposed to be reading stuff in. But I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna start the second book, Golden Sun, when I get a chance. Like I said, this video I'm seeing is like 22 minutes already, so um, I definitely could not have typed all this out, but this story blew me away so much. I just had to sit down and talk about all of it. I'm probably not, well, the next one, if the next one it really is as good as people are saying, I might have to make another video, but I'm not going to try to make this a regular thing. I don't know. We'll see. I might get lazy and just start making a ton of these instead of actually sitting down and physically um, typing out what I'm thinking. I think that's I think that's all I wanted to say. But yeah, y'all got to read this, man. It's awesome. Pick it up. It's great.